Okay, ladies and gentlemen, if we can come on in and take our seats. All students who would like to let a teacher know that you were here, please see one of the QR codes on either of the outside doors. Scan that to have your attendance taken. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, first, welcome. My name is Mr. Mack, but then again, what's in a name? Because a rose by any other name would still smell as sweet. That question that was posed by Shakespeare or someone is what our scholars will attempt to argue and answer this evening. Welcome to the Malvern Humanities Cultural Learning Event, What's in a Name? The Lindner Place Project. Now is a very tough time to have an opinion. But if the people on this stage to my left and my right are any indication, those times will change. Last year, community leaders asked our scholars to get involved, and involved they got. The What's in a Name project was born. To put the best possible position for our students to craft an informed, factual argument, resources, articles, videos, and artifacts were curated. Participants had several options to create a documentary, a visual exhibit, a research essay, a performance or poetry, or a website or social media account. They felt that they could use the ones that both represented themselves, their talents, and their creativity. You will see some of them on display tonight, but only a sampling. Some are also displayed outside as well. In addition, I interviewed community leaders, Mr. Kyle Richard, Mr. Fred Brewington, and Hofstra Director of Social Studies Education, Dr. Alan Singer. They each provided some firsthand experience to help contextualize the research done by our researchers. Classes viewed excerpts of the Defining Moments documentary to further provide deep background on the civil rights movement in North Hempstead. All of these resources are available to you by scanning the QR code at the bottom of your flyer. Tonight, you will hear the voices of our scholars. Their opinions and arguments that they make are theirs. In June, they spoke eloquently and passionately to the Malvern Village Board, and we made a promise to share again. We ask that you listen and hear what they have to say and what they want to show you tonight. It is said that the key to argument is not agreement, but understanding. So we will now begin to understand. We start first with our first screening, and then you'll hear from the filmmakers themselves.
In 1911, the Amsterdam Development and Land Company bought its first plot of land in what was now known as Malvern, which was the Lindner Farm. This began Malvern's development as a suburban town from its rural beginnings. Malvern became an incorporated town on April 13, 1921, which is around the time when a man named Paul Lindner began to make many contributions to the town.
Paul Lindner was born in 1877 and then went on to attend Princeton Theological Seminary and graduate from Princeton University. He bought a large farm on Hempstead Avenue within the first decade of the 20th century. The Lindner Farm was the first plot of land that began Malvern's development as a town. Lindner himself was a real estate developer and made many investments toward what would eventually become the town. He was the man who sold most of the land that the Amsterdam Development and Land Company purchased, which would help establish the bulk of the village of Malvern.
The Lindner farm unfortunately burned down on January 18, 1921, leaving behind only the surrounding houses and properties. The surviving farmland was then sold to the Grossman family, which developed into what is known today as Crossroads Farm. Where Paul Lindner's estate stood a century ago is now the Grace Lutheran Church and School. Because of Lindner's contributions to the town, the developing town widely accepted him as a community and business leader, causing a street and eventually an elementary school to be named after him.
Continuing Malvern's history, around 40 years later, in May of 1963, the Malvern School District was one of the first districts in New York State to receive a desegregation order from State Education Commissioner James Allen Jr. Students of all races from Malvern, Lynbrook, Lakeview, and Rockville Center would now attend Public School District 12 together. There was sadly a backlash from within the community, as some people opposed integration nearly as strongly as people in the Jim Crow South. People held demonstrations and protests on both sides of the issue, despite the fact that racial integration is beneficial for all students. White parents, furious with the commissioner's plan, formed a group called the Taxpayers and Parents Association and advocated for the district to remain as it was, racially imbalanced. The Taxpayers and Parents Association was able to delay the ruling until October of 1965, when the Supreme Court declined the review of the association's case, ruling in favor of encouraging the Malvern schools to become racially balanced. Shortly after, a white parent filed a last effort to block the decision, but the plan was found to be a direct violation of the Civil Rights Act of 1964.
Despite this, Malvern schools successfully integrated the student body under the law. In the present day, Malvern schools are some of the most diverse in Nassau County. Sadly, people in Malvern are still resistant to change. According to former Superintendent Dr. James Hunderfund, more than a quarter of the eligible student population attends private schools. This is demonstrated as the town of Malvern is approximately 85% white, and yet the schools are only 15% white. Malvern schools generally do not have the best reputation among the townspeople, which is unfortunate as Malvern School District is an excellent environment for students like us to have grown up in. We are all extremely grateful for the unique environment in which we were raised and feel there is no reason to oppose racial or ethnic diversity in schools at any level.
Malvern's history of racism doesn't end there. The same Paul Lindner, who developed most of the town's land, as we discussed before, was a high-ranked member of the KKK on Long Island. During the 1920s, there was an estimated 20,000 members in the Long Island KKK, one of the most important being Lindner. He was known as the Great Titan of the New York Ku Klux Klan, as he led many riots and gatherings of the Klan, such as the March in Freeport in 1924, where 6,000 Klansmen attended. In Malvern, there was two 15-foot cross burnings that were held, one being at the Malvern train station and another at the Lindner farm. During this time, the KKK would burn crosses to intimidate African Americans and other people of color. The two cross burnings held in Malvern were done to celebrate the election of the Klan's third candidate as mayor. As well as burning crosses at the Lindner farm, the Klan members set off a large explosion of dynamite that had almost killed 6 of the firemen attempting to put out the fire at the farm.
At the time, Lindner's active role in the KKK did not seem to affect his reputation within the town. Yet as the world has become more progressive over the years, Malvern residents began to question whether a street and elementary schools should be named after a man such as Lindner. Since then, Lindner Place Elementary School was renamed Maurice W. Downing Elementary School, as Downing was a well-liked principal at the school who unfortunately perished with his family in a house fire. Although the school's name was changed, the name of the street, Lindner Place, still remains. In July of 2020, a petition was created in order to bring attention to this issue and try to get the town to change the name. As of May 2021, this petition has over 5,000 signatures, illustrating that a great number of people are in favor of this change.
Although there are many who support the change of the street name, there are still some that are hesitant. Arguments against the renaming of Lindner Place include that it would erase all of the historical contributions that Lindner has made to the town and that it would be costly. Changing the name of the street would involve switching several street signs out to replace the Lindner name for the selected new name. With the increased diversity of the district and town in recent years, it can be seen that racism has no place in the village of Malvern. When looking at all Lindner has done in his association with the KKK, it is clear that what he stood for does not hold true today. This is proven with Malvern's recent efforts to promote the rights of African Americans, as the town held a unity march in June of 2020 with hundreds of people from Malvern and the surrounding communities in attendance, which supported the beliefs of the Black Lives Matter movement.
Changing the name of Lindner Place would be another step in the direction of progress that Malvern is making to spread and promote racial and ethnic diversity within town by learning from the mistakes of the past. By not renaming Lindner Place, the town is holding onto past events that only go back on the progress made as Lindner's values still persist through the name of the street.
Furthermore, students of color should not have to attend a school on a street named after a man who tried to limit the rights of people of color in the past. This is why we believe the Malvern community should move swiftly, not to erase the past, but to strive towards a united community that stands for people of all backgrounds, especially our children, by renaming Lindner Place.
Ladies and gentlemen, Carlos Figueroa, Shane Hanley, Ravina Ramnath, Ariel Singh, Karina Suknanan, and Olivia Young. I thought my mic was off for a second.
And we created this documentary on Lindner Place. So my peers and I filmed, edited, and presented this documentary together back in May of our junior year. It is now October of our senior year at Malvern, and no change to the street name has been made. The namesake of a president of the KKK is not a legacy we want to keep in our beautiful town of Malvern. We do understand that these things take time, but we want reassurance from those in the town of Malvern that you're on our side.
Elementary-age students should not have to attend a school on a street named after a man such as Lindner. The village of Malvern is predominantly Catholic, and our schools are very diverse. And Lindner was a person whose beliefs stood against everything that both the schools and the surrounding community stand for today.
Therefore, my peers and I feel the town should change the name of Lindner Place, not to erase history or cause complications for residents who live on Lindner Place, but to build a better town for our children.
In July 2020, the petition was created to bring attention to this issue and to try to convince the town to change the name. As of October 2021, the petition has over 5,000 signatures, illustrating that there are thousands of people who support the name change of Lindner Place. We ask you, as students who once attended the Downing School as children, to take into consideration the message that keeping the name of the street would send to the young students of the future. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, Olivia Brown.
Hi, my name is Olivia Brown, and I'm a 9th grader here at Malvern High School. Paul Lindner was one of Malvern's founders and contributed much to this town's growth. Because of this, there's a street named after him, Lindner Place. However, he was also an active member of the Ku Klux Klan in Nassau County. While it's uncalled for to erase history, the street, Lindner Place, must be renamed because it creates a sense of inferiority in students of colors. It sustains the social barrier between Malvernites and the MUFSD, and it upholds a racial hierarchy. In the 1920s, Paul Lindner was a leading figure in Malvern who had accomplished much, for example, the establishment of the Malvern Bank. However, he was also the leader of a much darker, fear-instilling group, the KKK. During this time, he was responsible for recruiting tens and hundreds of Klan members. The local Klan also had a reputation for targeting people and causing them to run away from their towns. The targets of the KKK were not exclusive to just one group of people. No, the Klan went after anyone who didn't fit their picture of an ideal citizen. Keep what I'm about to say in the back of your mind. Did your family immigrate to the country in the 1920s, specifically from Ireland and Italy? Are you or anyone you know Jewish? Are you or anyone you know Black? What about Roman Catholics, specifically a member of the Our Lady of Lourdes parish? These are all groups that were targeted by the KKK, groups that many of us here, including myself, fit into. When the Nassau County branch of the Klan would direct attacks toward people like us, Lindner often participated as their leader. Recently, the Malvern School District community started to become more aware of Paul Lindner's association with the KKK and all the pain and fear that he's caused during his lifetime. In general, a street named after a Klan member is offensive, not to mention that this street is one on which Black students walk down every single day to get to school. Older students in the district feel unsettled knowing who Lindner was and that his legacy continues to be rewarded by the street name Lindner Place. Paul Lindner was a leader of the KKK, a group notorious for gaining a sense of superiority from the fact that they are white. Having a landmark in his name encourages racism and is counterproductive to those who strive to dismantle the racial hierarchy and make America a better place for minorities. One of the many concerns about renaming Lindner Place is the long list of legalities one must go through while their address changes. Such legalities include redirecting mail, informing one's cable company, and updating their DMV. These changes cost money for the homeowners who do not expect the village to compensate for them. Many homeowners who live on Lindner are aware of this, therefore they are hesitant to support the change. Nevertheless, while this concern is not unfounded, it should be noted that there is a more significant cause at stake. The community needs to take an active stand against racism. Being passive is equivalent to being an enabler. Another primary concern is that renaming Lindner Place will erase history and prevent future generations from learning from these mistakes. While understandable, this viewpoint is also unfounded because Lindner Place is not a learning opportunity. That street does not play the role of teaching the villagers about Malvern's past. Educating people in both the village community and school community can be done by other means. If villagers want to prevent history from being forgotten, lessons about Malvern's past can be given in school, or self-educating resources can be made more easily accessible. The street being named Lindner Place is neither the only way nor the most effective way to remember history. Counter-effectively, naming a street after someone serves the purpose of creating a memorial after them and celebrating their actions. The village government is aware of the existence of Lindner Place and who Paul Lindner was. Any decision they make is a conscious one, and they will make it knowing how much the street degrades the local Black community and the communities that we all belong to. Whether this name is changed or kept relies on the goodwill of the village. It is on all of us, together, to right this wrong. America's past was built on hatred, but its future does not have to be. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, Lorenzo Mayoni.
Hello, my name is Lorenzo Mayoni, and I'm a 9th grade student here at Malvern. And I'm going to be reading an excerpt from my essay that I wrote for the What's in a Name Lindner Place project. Maurice W. Downing is the school that is on Lindner Place. Downing's student population is 40% African American. For a street named after a KKK leader, almost half of the students in Downing would be seen as less than to Paul Lindner just because of these students' skin color. The proposed replacement name for Lindner Place is Cherry Lane. Cherry Lane as an acknowledgement to Miss Elizabeth Carroll Cherry. Cherry was one of the first Black students to attend Maurice W. Downing and went on to teach there for more than 30 years. Her passion to make her community a better place shows that she is a great example for all students of Downing. If the street were to be renamed to Cherry Lane, it would be an excellent way to honor Miss Cherry's legacy and to right the wrong of naming the street after Paul Lindner. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, Elizabeth Cardenas.
Hello, my name is Elizabeth Cardenas, and I'm currently a senior here at Malvern High School. It has come to everyone's attention how vital this topic must be now. It may be an uncomfortable journey, but it's a topic that we must discuss. We've come into a generation where we can no longer lie idly and wait for change to happen. We have to do it ourselves. As we all know, Lindner Place in Malvern has been under fire for the name it's been given. The man behind the name, Paul Lindner, was known to have relations with prejudiced groups, notably the KKK chapter in Malvern. Many years ago, there's no point trying to hide the ugliness of some of Malvern's history, for it'll get us nowhere. Yes, Malvern had racist groups in it, and yes, some people praised them. But this does not mean that that's the Malvern we are today. We have changed, and our society learned from our mistakes. We've learned the wrongs of prejudice, and we've learned to be more inclusive. The new Malvern community of today is a testament that shows that we do not continue to practice the misdeeds of decades ago. I walk the hallways of this school and notice all the diversity surrounding around me. I'm thankful I get to experience this every day, and I'll forever be grateful for the improvement we've made in Malvern. I'm forever grateful for the ancestors who fought for this change and who have let me have this wonderful experience here. While we fixed some of the mistakes from years prior, that does not mean our work is done. We have renamed the elementary school after a beloved principal, Maurice W. Downing. Yet we haven't changed the street that these children walk on every day. These little children deserve to walk along a street that's not named after someone who they're taught not to be like. Renaming the street will set an inspiration for the children to look at every day. Why should the street be named after someone who so badly represents the Malvern community? We are a diverse group of people with progressive ideas, as best shown through all my peers here. The future generation of the children should be able to walk on a street which they're proud to read the name on the sign and will proudly commemorate the person behind the name. We can teach them the change in this community and the change that we've all gone through and the pride that they should have in every nook and cranny of this town. Renaming Lindner Place should be the continuation of the improvement we're making every day. We should continue to honor those who deserve to be honored, such as Elizabeth Carroll Cherry, whose actions spoke volumes and is truly the embodiment of greatness in our small town. Her actions have even reached outside our community and have inspired the community for years. Why shouldn't a woman such as her be remembered as we've done to Maurice W. Downing? The future generations of Malvern should have that inspiration to look up to every day, continuing to push to be our best selves, truly being within the values of Malvern. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, Bijou Francois and Anika Duhaney.
Hi, I'm Bijou Francois. I'm a senior here at Malvern.
And I'm Anika Duhaney. I am also a senior at Malvern.
Now, you may have seen it as you walked into the MPAC today, but for our project regarding Lindner Place stature, we did a collective art piece that depicted how the legacy of racism and Paul Lindner are left to grotesquely linger over the school district so long as the street keeps its name. The piece portrayed members of Lindner's Ku Klux Klan looming over the Maurice W. Downing building, where elementary students wretchedly entered, weary of being watched by the apparitions. When reflecting on the work we did, it became clear that it was a conscious choice to maintain the name, a choice driven by bigotry and the desire to perpetuate a racial superiority throughout generations on end. It's only our hope that the powers of Malvern have the courage to refute this tradition of immoral intimidation so that the district can truly claim to hold a safe, comfortable, and welcoming environment for all students. Thank you.
Thank you.
Their piece is displayed on the table outside. If you haven't seen it on your way in, I encourage you to do so on the way out. Now, our young documentarians present our second screening of the evening, The Racial Divide, a look into Lindner Place.
Racism, a worldwide struggle. Despite efforts to improve race relations within our communities, racism has found a way to disguise itself unbeknownst to the public. Segregation was a common practice in the United States before the Civil Rights Act of 1964 prohibited it. Despite this, there is still existing racial division in America today. This can be especially seen in Long Island communities such as Malvern. The ongoing racial injustices experienced by the Black community led to many protests and conflicts regarding the debate of integrating schools. Marches against racial inequities have taken place in the past, one of the most prominent being Dr. Martin Luther King leading a march down Ocean Avenue, an important street within the community. Ocean Avenue is essentially a racial divide that separates the Malvern community, primarily comprised of white people, and the part of West Hempstead east of Ocean, mainly consisting of Black people. This division has become very obvious to the public, and the communities are seen as an ocean apart.
My office is actually in Malvern, so there is a huge disparity. Like it's almost like as you cross over Ocean Avenue, it's as if it's as if that's a huge divide. So I would definitely say that there is a huge difference between, again, the integration.
Evidently, racial tensions have continuously existed between Malvern and Lakeview. This introduced many disagreements within these communities, a prominent one being the renaming of Lindner Place. Paul Lindner was a man remembered as a humble farmer and an important historical figure in the Malvern community. His contributions were highly valued, and the Malvern Elementary School and the street it was located on was named after him. It's been recently discovered that Paul Lindner was a leader in the Ku Klux Klan.
Historians tend to identify organizations like the Ku Klux Klan with the South, but clandestine racist groups existed on Long Island in the 1920s to the 1960s. Some local historians estimate that in the mid-1920s, over 20,000 Long Island residents were Klan members. Because of protests by community residents, the school on Lindner Place was renamed from the Lindner Place School to the Maurice W. Downing School.
Frederick Brewington, a respected Long Island civil rights attorney, shares his experiences attending this school during efforts for desegregation in the Malvern School District.
Because I was one of the students that went to the Lindner Place School as part of that integration process. There's no reason why that school should be named after an officer of the Ku Klux Klan.
This begs the question of whether or not the street Lindner Place should be renamed.
And it stands, anytime you name a street after someone, it stands as a monument to that individual. The question is, what do we do with it from here? All the students that go to the Downing School, knowing that when they travel down that block, they're not traveling down a monument to someone who felt that the students in that school were less than.
The public offers many different perspectives on the issue at hand.
I think that if it goes through the right process and is decided that they want to change the name and it goes through the legal process, then we can change it.
I would like to see the community come together to maybe find a better name that appeases everybody. But I don't like when it becomes a combative thing. These people want it gone and these people want it here. The issue isn't the name of the school. The issue is all of the other things that are coming behind what that name symbolizes, and that is what I hope through community activism, like how you guys are doing now, that's how I think we solve those issues.
I do believe that anything that represents violence, separation, or inequality for any human being, because whether you're Black, white, Asian, East Asian, it doesn't Muslim, Jew, it doesn't matter. I think anything that represents separation amongst should be revisited and explore whether or not it's a good representation of where we are today in our community.
These differing viewpoints provide substantial evidence that the street should be renamed. Decisions such as these are vital as they define racial divisions existing within our district and communities. Even when looking in the Malvern School District, there's proof of racial tensions.
And what you have in Malvern is a community that is diverse, but a public school system that is largely minority, because white families do not send their kids to a public school. I think that the change in the name of Lindner Place would create the possibility for broad community discussion of how to finally address the history of Malvern and perhaps to bring the community together.
Keeping the street name Lindner Place ultimately encourages the neighborhoods being demographically separated. Renaming the street will promote unity by joining the communities in the name of racial equality and justice. Ultimately, this will allow for a prosperous, successful school district in which the students will benefit exceptionally. Hopefully, we can move towards eliminating contributions to this racial divide.
Ladies and gentlemen, Sabrina Ramharak and Jamila Smith.
Hi, my name is Jamila Smith.
And I'm Sabrina Ramrock, and we're juniors here at Malvern High School. Together, we created this documentary titled The Racial Divide, in which we portray our viewpoint on the renaming of Lindner Place. In our journey to create this project, we went on a hunt to research and investigate the issue and the history of the man named Paul Lindner, as well as the history as the town we call home. As you know, Paul Lindner was an influential part of the founding of the town of Malvern. He was a hard worker and involved in his community. However, he was a leading member of Long Island's KKK. This is a critical detail that we cannot afford to overlook. Lindner was a major part of an organization that stood for nothing but hatred and inequality. We believe that these traits do not align with the Malvern community and the values of which we stand for. We have tried to assess this issue from multiple perspectives by interviewing a wide array of people from different towns as well as different races. After evaluating all the opinions and reasoning of the public, we came to our own conclusion. The street name Lindner Place must be renamed. We believe that this issue is part of a wider issue. We have observed and experienced firsthand the differences that exist within our communities. Malvern and Lakeview are very different in many ways, especially when looking at the people that inhabit these communities.
As you are aware, these two towns are racially distinct. However, we believe this school district unites us. The Malvern School District has broken down racial barriers by integrating students of all races, embracing us kids in varying cultures and ways of life. This pertains to the renaming of the street, as Malvern schools embrace racial diversity and equality to the highest degree, and it would be a shame to disregard this progress we have made as a community to honor a man who does not tolerate the same. We try to shed light on imperative topics in school by attempting to bring awareness to things that deserve to be discussed. But we spend little time talking about other prominent issues that impact us. Issues like unfair opportunities. Issues like institutionalized racism. Issues that lie right under our noses, like the street that is Lindner Place. Paul Lindner is no longer considered a hero, as we now realize that he stood for and supported the racism and prejudice that plagues our society. His name should not be on the street that young children walk on each day to go to a school in a district that promotes unity. We have a duty. We must look at this issue. We have to stop this inaction. We must not only bring awareness to this situation, but we must stop pretending it will go away. Ignoring issues like this is the reason they continue to grow and impact us as a society. We have to acknowledge these problems before we hope to bring about change. We can always learn from the past in our history. However, we do not have to honor things like this. To properly honor the history of the school, the unification of our people, and the integrity we embellish, it is our duty to stand up against racism, injustice, and incite change. Thank you.
Recently, our students had the opportunity to sit for an after-school guest lecture from Mr. Pupke of the Malvern Historical and Preservation Society. Unfortunately, Mr. Pupke was unable to be with us here tonight, but he would like us to show his speech to the Malvern Village Board 1 month after we visited.
I am here to speak this evening on the topic of whether the village should rename Lindner Place. I'm in favor of renaming the street, and I'll explain why. First, I speak tonight as a private citizen with an acute interest in the history of Malvern. I'm not here speaking on behalf of any group or organization. I'll keep my comments as brief as possible. Second, as you know, last meeting, Dr. Lewis from the Malvern School District was here with students who spoke about the subject, and I commend Dr. Lewis and the students for being here, and I felt that they made a great presentation, although some of their comments were not quite accurate. I've been speaking to Dr. Lewis and to Mr. Mock, who I'm going to be working with the kids on that at some point in the future. One of the primary mistakes the students made was that they need to understand that the village itself was not even in existence when Lindner Place was made. So the board, the mayor, the trustees, had no role whatsoever in naming Lindner Place. Lindner Place was really named by Mr. Lindner at a time when he was developing the property where Lindner Place was. But really, I just wanted to mention here tonight, I'm here to speak about Paul Lindner, someone who I've never met, obviously, and a man who I only know through press accounts and a few secondhand accounts. As such, it's really difficult to get a measure of a person and to really know who he was, but he, like many people, had a life with many contradictions. And with Paul Lindner, there was a life that he led prior to 1920-21, and then there was a life he led while the leader of the Ku Klux Klan on Long Island. As in his early life, he was a man of civic virtue. He was involved in many organizations. He was a minister. He developed. He was the largest landholder in Malvern at the time. The land under where we stand right now was owned by Paul Lindner. Crossroads Farm was owned by Paul Lindner. He owned property from Wright Avenue all the way to Cornwall Avenue, and he developed it and sold it over the years. Malvern probably wouldn't be here had he not sold any of the land. But beginning in the 1920s, he suddenly appeared as a recruiter, a Kleagle for the Ku Klux Klan, the resurging Ku Klux Klan. And just a word about the Ku Klux Klan in the 1920s. Historians and scholars will tell you that the Ku Klux Klan in the 1920s was different somewhat than the Ku Klux Klan in the 1870s. But in my mind, drawing such distinctions is wrong, because the Klan of the 1920s was still anti-black, anti-immigrant, anti-Semitic, and virulently anti-Roman Catholic. They were intolerant, and it's my opinion that they inherited the sins of the prior Klan and all of its activities. Locally, the Ku Klux Klan fought hard to prevent Our Lady of Lourdes Parish from being formed and coming into the village. The Ku Klux Klan intimidated and burned crosses on the homes of people who refused its demands to become members, and the Ku Klux Klan celebrated the defeat of the first Roman Catholic mayor in the village by burning crosses on the Lindner farm. But there's an important story about the village of Malvern and its residents that needs to be told about the Ku Klux Klan. Despite Paul Lindner's power in the Ku Klux Klan, large percentages of the residents of the village of Malvern fought him and fought to keep him and his ideas out of the village. At the height of his power in the KKK in the mid-1920s, Paul Lindner twice ran for the school board in Malvern and twice was soundly defeated by the people in the village of Malvern who stood behind a curtain and were able to tell him that they don't want him here. Despite his efforts to recruit KKK members, village leaders rejected him, and they were mocked by him and others in the KKK. Despite that fact, despite the fact that he and 8 others started the Bank of Malvern, his leadership role in the Bank of Malvern was very short-lived. Within 3 to 4 years, he was booted out of the Bank of Malvern, and within 8 years of becoming the head of the Ku Klux Klan on Long Island, he was the successful minister and real estate developer he had been. He was bankrupt, he was foreclosed, and he was effectively run out of town by the people of the village. He moved to Smithtown in 1932 and is really never heard of again. So to address the question at the core of my presentation, were Paul Lindner's activities as the head of the KKK on Long Island in the 1920s enough to warrant this board 100 years later to change the name of Lindner Place? I believe so. I've tried any number of ways to see if there's any evidence that directly ties Paul Lindner to specific acts of racism and terrorism. However, there is no direct evidence tying him to any such activities that I could find, although he just seems to be always one step removed from these activities. However, in 1923, he was a leader of the KKK on Long Island, and there was a Monsignor from the Brooklyn Archdiocese, Monsignor Bernard John Quinn, the son of poor Irish immigrants, who fought for those who were rejected on the basis of their black skin. When he saw droves of black children orphaned because of desperate poverty in the 1920s, he opened an orphanage in Wading River called the Little House of Providence. He looked to provide the children the best teachers, resources, and care. But twice in 1923, the KKK burned down that orphanage while Paul Lindner was the head of the KKK. Undaunted, by the way, Monsignor Quinn founded Little Flower Children's Services of New York, which is still in existence today. So here we are 100 years later. Difficult question for the board. Can you rename the street? Will you rename a street? But I ask you to take the action of renaming Lindner Place. I know it's not an easy task, but we stand on the shoulders of the people who came before us, the proud people of Malvern who rejected the KKK in the 1920s, and we stand on the shoulders of Monsignor Quinn, and I ask that the board take the affirmative step of rejecting racism and condoning and proving that racism and intolerance are never condoned in this village. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pumpkin.
Ladies and gentlemen, Geoffrey Anwar.
Hello, I'm Geoffrey Anwar, a senior at Malvern High School. It has been shown that the public iconography of an area, street names for example, speaks volumes about the identity, character, and priorities of an area. History gives us many examples. In Berlin, the street names reflected the different administrations that governed the city, whether they be Nazi, Soviet, or Western. In Bucharest, Romania, its communist leaders imposed new street names as part of their program for societal transformation, and these changes were removed after they were ousted. In Nairobi, Kenya, the incoming British Empire changed the street names to legitimize and highlight their control. After Kenya gained its independence, the new government changed the street names again to reflect Kenya's new status as a free, sovereign nation. All these instances depict how street names are reflective of the social values of the areas they are in. This is important to the discussion because obviously we as a community do not espouse or support Paul Lindner's values. For the three communities of Malvern, Lakeview, and Lynbrook, inclusion is paramount. What people see when they stroll through the neighborhood and where our kids go to school should reflect the values we hold dear. The question we answer today is not merely a question of whether we rename the street. It is a question of what do we want to tell the world about ourselves, and history awaits our response. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, Kayla Lawrence.
Hello, I'm Kayla Lawrence, a senior at Malvern High School. I'll be reading my poem. A name holds significance as if it were a handbag. It contributes to a story, a bigger picture one might add. For a district that's been vastly diverse from the start, a street named after a man who wore white cloth and harassed people who disagreed with his thoughts contradicts the message that Malvern displays. Granted, Lindner played a large role with the establishment of Malvern, that being farming, real estate, and other factors. His bigoted social beliefs in association with the notorious Confederation makes it hard to argue for the preservation of the name. A name gives identity. If you're passing by the street, are you more likely to see him as a gentleman or a potential threat to society? If one can change the name of the school from Lindner Place to Maurice, why pause at renaming the street? Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, Carly Botita.
Hello, my name is Carly, and I'm a senior here at Malvern High School. I've been in this district since kindergarten, and one of the things I love most about Malvern is its diversity. I'm lucky enough to have had experienced the loving and accepting community and family that Malvern is. When I was first made aware of Paul Lindner's history, I could not even believe it to be true. The fact that young children, and myself at that age, walk down a street that exalts this figure of evil every day shakes me to my core. There's no reason to immortalize and honor Paul Lindner, who spread hatred and intolerance in our community. As small as this change may seem, this street name reflects the core values of our town. I know I speak for all of my Malvern family when I say this is not who we are. We need to change this name for those who had fallen victim to Lindner's hatred, for the generations who fought for justice before us, and for the future of our world. Thank you.
It is time for our final documentary screening of the evening, also containing a cameo from community leader Ms. Doris Hicks, who unfortunately was unable to be with us this evening. We present Lindner Place, A Timeline.
York City lies the incorporated village of Malvern. Since its incorporation in 1921, it has grown from a whistle stop on the Long Island Railroad to the most progressive village on the South Shore.
Come gather round, people, wherever you roam, and admit that the waters around you have grown, and accept it that soon you'll be drenched to the bone. If your time to you is worth saving, then you better start swimming or you'll sink like a stone, or the times they are a-changing. Some writers and critics who prophesize with your pen, and keep your eyes wide, the chance won't come again. And don't speak too soon, for the wheel's still in spin, and there's no telling who that it's naming. Was the loser now will be later to win, for the times they are a-changing.
I felt that something needed to be done. And we tried a couple of times, and my community tried a couple of times before I even moved here. I've been here for 35 years, and I talked to other people in the community, and they told me that they had tried to get it done, and they were not successful. So people need to know, and not for nasty reasons or anything, because that's not the kind of person I am, but when we know that something is as blatant as that, and knowing the history of who Paul Lindner was, I just feel that because our students from all three communities go to Morris W. Downey, that the street name should have been changed. I just feel that it needs to be something that would be acceptable by all students, all residents, not just students, all residents of all communities, three communities, Lynbrook, Malvern, and Lakeview.
Ladies and gentlemen, Justin Obiol.
Hey everyone, I hope you enjoyed my short documentary. I'm really glad for the opportunity to finally show it publicly. I worked really hard last year to make it as comprehensive as possible, from the founding of Malvern to current times. I was thrilled to be able to interview Ms. Hicks, and it was a real pleasure, so I'd like to thank her first and foremost. When I started my research, I have to be honest, I didn't intend on making an opinionated documentary. But by the end of it, I couldn't imagine not taking a stand. Research was a really interesting experience. I found things everywhere from all corners of the internet, you know, from old Malvern Historical Society Facebook posts from like 2002 to photojournals of Malvern High School from decades ago. It's needless to say that Lindner doesn't represent the values of Malvern at all. I hope we could take some real action soon and follow through with changing the name. It's a really important and necessary step in moving forward, and it's a good opportunity to unite as a community. We can all agree that individuals should be treated for who they are as people. People should be treated with love, understanding, and respect. Individuals should not be judged on behalf of their race, ethnicity, gender, class, or creed. Lindner represents a violent antithesis of these values, and we should honor someone more deserving. I mean, who isn't? Let's come together and move forward. Thank you.
On behalf of our entire team, I would like to thank you for joining us here tonight. I would also like to thank, in addition to our panelists, in addition to our filmmakers, I'd also like to thank Austin Conjay, Madison Conjay, and Kayla George for their assistance, and all the students who participated in this project last year. You've only seen a sample. We'd also have special thanks to the Board of Education of the Malvern Union Free School District, Dr. Lorna Lewis, Superintendent of Schools, Mr. Stephen Gohuli, Assistant Superintendent of Curriculum Instruction and Educational Services, Mr. Michael Messina, District Supervisor of Music, Fine Arts, and Family and Consumer Science, Mr. Michael Ainsley, Malvern High School Head Custodian, of course, Mr. Severino for making all the technology possible with his crew, Ms. Deborah Sandorfi, and of course, the teachers and students of the Malvern school community. One quick plug. As you exit, please feel free to visit the Malvern Remembers installation next door and see the work that our K-12 students completed and contributed to the commemoration of the 10th anniversary of the attacks on September 11th. In closing, I would say that the work of our scholars has just begun. This project has made us all realize that there is a need for different and at times uncomfortable conversations to be had on the parts of our students and in our community. We hope to explore that as part of a Malvern C Committee, a group of students interested in investigating social justice issues through literature and how those issues impact the emotional education of our community. Malvern, we see you, and we thank you for seeing us tonight. On behalf of all our scholars, thank you and have a wonderful evening. Ladies and gentlemen, the Superintendent of Schools, Dr. Lorna Lewis.
Thank you. And of course, nothing could have happened of this magnitude without Mr. Mack. So we want to give him, he just takes an idea, and let me say this, what a privilege it is for me to be the superintendent, to listen to students who speak as articulately, passionately as they are. This is part of our portrait of a graduate that we're forming. Thank you so much for being the wonderful students that you have been. Last year I was blown away, and again, each time I see them, I am even more impressed and grateful to be a part of the Malvern schools. Thank you to the teachers who shaped them, and let's hope that Village Hall listened to this wonderful presentation and that eventually they will see the results of their actions. So thank you for coming out and supporting them.
Everybody can go home. Remember, we're letting you out a little bit early because we didn't take a break, so please feel free to walk through the Malvern Remembers installation.